Hello, my name is Jing Cheng, or you can call me Frank. And today I'm going to present our paper on Chinese quantifier scope, Concord, and lexical resource semantics. So Chinese quantifier scope is one of the most provocative research areas of Chinese linguistics. So let's first go over some of the basics of Chinese quantifier scope. For the sentence, 一个学生读过每本书. One student read every book. The sentence only have the wide existential reading. However, if we flip the two quantifiers, and now a preverbal adverb do, often glossed as all, is required, and the sentence suddenly becomes ambiguous. Right now, both the wide existential and the wide universal reading are available. And more interestingly, if we topicalize the sentence, so if we move the object of the sentence to the beginning of the sentence, and now the wide universal reading is no longer available. So this brings us to the first mystery remaining in Chinese quantifier scope. What are the guiding principles that determines quantifier scope readings? And there is another mystery surrounding the adverb do. It often co-occurs with the universal quantifier mei. However, at a glance, both do and mei carries universality. So why can they co-occur? It is definitely not the same thing as in English. Every and o cannot co-occur. So what's the semantic function of do, and how can we resolve this co-occurrence? We will now cover three prior accounts of this topic, and an analysis through principles of economy by Wu, a decompositional analysis by Lin, and finally a presuppositional account by Liu. So first, let's talk about the principles of economy. It's introduced by Fox and mainly contains three principles: the scope economy, stating that scope shifting operations cannot be semantically vacuous, and shortest move, stating that QR must, or quantifier raising, must move a quantificational phrase to the closest position in which it is interpretable. And finally, type disparity stated that QPs must occur sister to a node of semantic type ET for interpretation. QPs not sister to a node of type ET, for example, objects, must undergo QR to a position sister to a node of type T, where from an ET can be created by a lambda abstraction. So based on Fox principles of economy analysis, English quantifier scopes contains quantifier scope ambiguity. So there are two ways of performing quantifier raising. One is raising the object to the top of the tree, and the other is raising the subject to the top of the tree. However, Chinese is also another SVO language, and the words order is basically exactly the same as in English. But why Chinese is unambiguous in this situation? Wu explains this difference by arguing that Mandarin is a topic prominent language. And then Wu also theorized that there is an extra topic phrase sitting at the very top of the tree. And according to principles of economy, there must be a QR of 每种语言 in this every language in this example that use the wide existential reading. However, because the existence of the top P, the optional quantifier lowering is no longer available. Similarly, the other optional QR is also not available for similar reason. However, there are two major problems with the principles of economy analysis. First is that it failed those doubly topicalized sentences. For example, for this sentence, 一个学生每本书都读过. A student, every book, do read. Only for this sentence, only the wide existential reading is available. However, because there are two top P's, the gap between the top P and the object is no longer there. So according to Wu's analysis, this sentence should be ambiguous, but it's not. Also, principles of economy analysis only works on the sentences with a leading existential quantifier. The analysis is not applicable to any sentence with the adverb though as well. And there is another decompositional account of Chinese quantifier scope. So as we mentioned before, there is always this puzzle of the co-occurring of mei and dou. So why can they co-occur when they are both universal? Let alone the co-occurrence is mandatory in some situations. Lin argues that mei and dou are actually not quantifiers. Mei has a semantic similar to the definite article the, which marks an NP to its maximal polarity, symbolized by this circle plus symbol, and dou is a distributive operator. So let's consider the sentence 每个学生都来了 every student 都 came 每个学生 every student specified students to its maximal polarity entity, and though distribute the function came to each of the atomic item of the plural set. So now the full sentence can get the correct reading. However, Liu disagrees with this decompositional account of quantifier scope. First, though in this sentence is mandatory. However, Lin's analysis cannot explain the mandatory occurrence of though. Nothing really prevents the maximal student from combining with the function came. Besides, post-verbal mei-NPs do not co-occur with though. For example, the sentence 一个学生读过每本书 though is not only not mandatory in this sentence, it cannot appear in this sentence. Adding a though anywhere in the sentence will make it ungrammatical. So Liu argues that mei-NPs are truly quantificational and explain though through obligatory presupposition, just like two in John went to the party, Liu went to the party too. However, we found two problems with this presuppositional account. First is that though actually possesses a genuinely semantic import. The sentence 每个学生都读过一本书 has both quantifier scope readings available. However, without though, the sentence 每个学生读过一本书 can only have a decompositional reading. Secondly, considering those two sentences, 每本书一个学生都读过. This sentence, every book, one student 都 read. And this sentence is ungrammatical regardless of whether there is though. However, if we replace the existential QP with a proper noun, say 张三, the sentence is grammatical with though present. And those two sentences actually have no difference in their propositional alternatives. So we cannot really explain this difference by presuppositional analysis. So, but actually, let's rewind a little bit. Both Lin and Liu talk about the problem of mei and dou co-occurring, and how there's a clash between the two universal quantifiers. But is there really a problem? In fact, this clash is actually pretty common and often regarded as a concord. One of the most famous concord is the negative concord. It is typical in Polish, and I'm sorry for my terrible Polish pronunciation. Nikt nie persist do nobody no came, and it's also occurred in colloquially in English. I don't know nothing, or can nobody tell me nothing? And both the no word and the negative marker no and nie express negativity. However, there is no clash between the two negatives, and neither sentence are double negatives as well. And concord is idiosyncratic to the language. Well, Polish has a negative concord, Chinese doesn't. The sentence 没人没来 or no person no came can only have a double negation rating. So maybe the co-occurrence of mei and dou is a quantificational concord in Chinese, but it's not in English. So now let's take negative concord as the background to analyze quantificational concord. Negative concord is enforced by two principles. The first one is negation complexity constraint, saying that for each sign, there may be at most one negation that is component of the top exponent value and has mean value as its component. And the second one is the negation criterion that stated that for every verb, if there is a negation in the top value of the verb that has scope over the mean value of the verb, then the negation must be an element of parts of the parts list in the verb. So there are actually some terminologies from LRS, and we will cover them shortly. So maybe we can form an analysis by enforcing a quantificational concord. And we actually come up with four guiding principles of this quantificational concord analysis. So the first principle stated that every scopal element in the logic form must be contributed by a quantifier. And secondly, the quantifier order list, which is something that we added to LRS, records a linear order of the scopal elements, with the exception of the quantifier of a verb is all scoped by a quantifier by the quantifiers in the object NPs. And thirdly, quantifiers at the preverbal position determine the quantificational scope of the verb, and the first QP to its left. And finally, the quantifier scope order must be a subsequence of the QO, the quantifier order list. So let's first use the quantificational concord to analyze the requirement of dou. So recall that principle 3 stated that quantifiers at the preverbal position determines the quantificational scope of the verb and the first QB to its left. So so there is a universal quantifier, 每本书, every book, in the sentence on the left. So that means and it's at the top P position, which is at a preverbal position. So the verb and the subject NP must be universal. However, the subject NP is existential, so there is no way the sentence can be grammatical. But if the subject NP is a proper noun, then the first QP is now not the subject NP anymore. It becomes now the top P is the first QP. And we already know that it's universal, and therefore dou is also mandatory. And we can actually analyze both sentences. And now let's use quantifier order list to analyze quantifier scope ambiguity. So for the sentence on the left, every student dou read a book. The QO list is for all, exists for all. And both readings are actually subsequence of the QO. And therefore, both readings are available. And the sentence on the right, however, a student read every book. Only two elements are in its QO. For all exists. And therefore, there can only be one reading available, which is the white universal. Okay, and now let's go see some fancier sentences. The case was a single topicalization, a book every student dou read. The QO list is exists for all. So right now, although we have two for alls, but the two for all both located after the exists, and therefore there is only one white existential reading. And similar to the case with the double topicalization, the QO list is also exists for all, and therefore there can only be one reading. And finally, I'm going to present a full lexical resource semantics analysis. So LRS is similar to MRS, but it's more powerful and yet more concrete. So it's committed to type 2, and it can qualify over subterms. And it is also the description language is more convenient. It allows semantic typing. It doesn't require a feature structure, and also it allows real functions to be used. Okay, so now let's analyze the sentence. 每个学生都读过一本书. Every student all read a book. So the logic form of 每个 every is something like this. Is it that for all x? We don't really know what's the condition yet, but we know that x is a subterm of the condition. And similar for the implication, we only know that that it has to has a subterm x. And then student, on the other hand, we only know that it have a subterm student. So when we reach the NP level, we can actually know that right now the logic form should be for all x. Then the condition should be should have a subterm student x, and the implication should also have a subterm x. And it is similar for the object over here. Over here, but instead of implication, right now we have a conjunction. And also, though is universal, so when it's combined with red, it becomes for all x, the condition contains the subterm x, and the implication contains the subterm read xy, and y is a variable and x is this x. And at the VP level, we can know that the logic form has a universal subterm contributed by the verb, and another existential subterm contributed by the object. And finally, at the sentence level, we can fill in the blank. And right now, we can know that the universal subterm is student, and we can get 2 readings out of it. So because there are 2 ways of arranging these subterms, one is that exists is a subterm of for all, which will give us the wide universal reading. And when for all is a subterm of exist, that will give us the wide existential reading. And both readings satisfy principle 4, because right now we know that the QO list contains for all, exists for all. And so that there is scope ambiguity, and we can get both readings. Okay, and now let's do another analysis of the sentence with the flipped quantifiers. 一个学生读过每本书. A student read every book. So the analysis is very similar, but right now we don't really need the universal though anymore. And at the sentence level, we can still have 2 ways to resolve the subterms. However, the wide universal way will fail principle 4, because the QO right now only has 2 elements, exists and for all. So there is no scope ambiguity. Finally, I want to conclude this talk by reconciling the co-occurrence of mei and dou through quantificational concord. And there are other preverbal adverbs in Chinese, such as ye also, or you again, that behaves pretty much similar as dou. Maybe we can perform some kind of similar analysis on those adverbs as well. And also, finally, I want to ask whether or not quantificational concord appears in other languages, or is something unique to Chinese. And I am looking forward for our discussion, and thank you for your time.